David Whitaker, and I'm with the Georgia Employees Association. I'd like to thank you for joining our webinar today, and I'd like to thank Pete Tosh, our speaker. Let me give you a little background about Pete. Pete is founder of the Focus Group, which is a management consulting firm that assists organizations in sustaining their profitable growth through the management of 4 core disciplines, which are strategic planning, implementing strategic HR management initiatives, enhancing customer loyalty, and maximizing leadership effectiveness. Pete is consulted and trained for companies across the U.S. and the nation, including Europe, Canada, the Caribbean, the Middle East. He's worked closely with senior management organizations such as Exxon, Brinks, EMC, State Farm Insurance, Marriott, NCI, Freddie Mac, and YKK, just to name a few. Before I turn it over to Pete, I'd like to give you a couple of housekeeping issues here. Number one, due to the number of people on the call today, we have the lines muted, but there's a feature that allows you to type in the questions. As questions arise, please type them in, and I will read them at the end of the presentation. Also, if you have entered your audio PIN number, I can unmute you at the end of the line, which may be a little bit easier than typing the questions in. So, anyway, Pete, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right, David, I appreciate it. Thank you for the introduction, and good Friday afternoon to everybody. We appreciate you participating in the webinar today. And as a thank you for doing so, GEA has a special little offer that for you that I'll explain at the end of the webinar, which maybe will help you in your organization in both your employee engagement and your union avoidance programs. And as David mentioned, please, as we go along, type in any questions you have, particularly those about how you might take some of this information back to your leadership team and show them the value of some of what's going on and the value of some of the preventive steps that we're going to discuss today. So we're going to cover a lot of material in a short period of time. So send in those questions as we go, or certainly we can talk to you offline about any that you have. I had built this workshop today, or webinar, around these 5 topics. Some practical steps for minimizing union vulnerability and steps for increasing employee engagement. Then we'll talk about GEA's survey that addresses both of those issues. Quick reference to kind of your next steps as HR professionals, and then that thank you that GEA is offering for your participation today. Also, let me just apologize in advance. I've got to tell David I have a persistent cough, so I've got water and juice and fruit lozenges and everything here. But if I pause for a minute, that's why. I'll try not to cough into the phone. So let's look at that first topic of minimizing union vulnerability, and I'd like to address it then with these 4 areas. Starting out with GEA's proactive approach, and then quickly some of the highlights of the ambulance election regulations that some of you are familiar with, and then we'll talk about how pro-union employees tend to look at their organizations differently. As I hope you realize, that GEA takes a proactive approach to helping its members achieve their business plans and their success. And of course, a part of that is maintaining a union-free environment. And as I know many of you participated in Mel Hayes' webinar where he talked about the NLRB regulations in some detail on Wednesday this week, and those of you who haven't probably seen notices about it. But in short, everybody tends to be in agreement that those are going to make it much easier for unions to organize organizations in the future, easier than it's been in the past. So as a result, GEA is encouraging all of its members then to take a proactive step, in other words, or steps, in other words, to create a positive work environment by improving organizational communication and training supervisors, of course, and help strengthening the relationships between the employees and their service and their supervisors, and then also implementing union vulnerability and employee engagement surveys that we'll talk about. And those are so important because they can be a first step to improvement, because those surveys will let you know whether you have issues, and if so, where those issues lie. So there's a lot on this slide that's kind of a quick overview of the board's new regulations, and which are going to take effect very shortly, April 14th of this year. And as you can see, these regulations then, in essence, are speeding up the unionization process at nearly every stage in the process. With these new regulations, then elections can be held just a matter of a couple of short weeks after a notice of petition. And I think back to the fact that years ago I was involved in a campaign with the Teamsters that lasted 9 months. And as I think about it, I mean, we needed every day that we had of those 9 months because of the time the Teamsters had spent with our employees in advance before we knew about it. And during that time, the Teamsters had planted some false ideas. I'm not going to go through these regulations in detail today because, as I mentioned, some of you participated in Mel's workshop webinar the other day and earlier this week, and just the time that we have available, and obviously because I'm not a labor attorney, but in essence, then these regulations are designed to help unions by speeding up this process and taking away the time that you've had in the past to communicate to employees, and in essence give the labor unions more time to pass messages on to your employees, some very possibly being false messages, before you even know that that communication is going on. And so these regulations give you less time to, as an employer, to find out what the issues are and to communicate with your employees about what is factual, and to explain to your employees about how the election process works and how the negotiation process works, and the disadvantages to them of being represented by a union. So you're going to have less time to do all of those things, and in a great way, we feel, to negate that advantage that unions have now is to survey, to identify any issues that you have and address those issues and cause your employees to feel like they don't need representation by a labor union. And there's been some interesting, pretty revealing research around why employees would be interested in having a union represent them. And in some of that research, as I've noted here with the asterisk, there one particular piece of research that were 10,000 employees involved, and those employees were given a questionnaire addressing 100 issues, workplace-related issues. And as a part of that process, they asked these employees whether or not they would like to be represented by a union. Surveyed the employees, and then they segmented the employees' responses into two groups, a group that wanted to be represented and those that did not. And you can see here that the findings showed some significant differences in how employees viewed their organizations, or particularly those employees that wanted to be represented. You know, they had different views about the organization in terms of the future of the organization and whether the organization was committed to quality efforts or not. The pro-union employees had significant perceptions of trust, lack of trust they had and confidence in their leadership team, and whether the leadership team was exhibiting ethical practices or not, and cared about employees. They had a much more negative view about whether they had opportunities for development and advancement. They tended to not feel that their managers, direct supervisors, showed them respect and gave them fair treatment. And then there were different negative views about pay equity and work-life balance. And not surprisingly then maybe, several of these issues are also same issues that determine whether employees tend to be engaged or not. So while the union vulnerability, where it's not the same as employee engagement, there certainly are some similarities. And so the GEA, using this recent union vulnerability research, has developed 12 questions that are included in their GEA survey, and allow you to determine then where there might be some vulnerability for labor organizing to take place within your organizations. Second issue then is, or topic I want to talk about today is how to go about increasing employee engagement. There's just a ton that's been written about this. There's just over 100 research studies have been conducted around the subject of employee engagement. When you look at the organizations that are actively trying to improve their levels of employee engagement, it reads like the who's who of American business. But for those of you who have not been active in trying to enhance employee engagement, what we mean by an engaged employee is one that exhibits discretionary effort. They do more than just what they're asked to do. They have a greater appreciation for how their performance impacts their coworkers and their department and their organization's success. And engaged employees are continuously striving to improve their capabilities and their actual job performance. And the research, as we'll look at some of it in just a minute, it just shows that employees who are tend to be engaged perform at a higher level, which is a higher level than unengaged or disengaged employees, which is kind of common sense. But it's not always common practice that we take the steps that we can take to take advantage in utilizing enhanced employee engagement. And very significantly, and we'll talk about this in just a moment, an engaged employee is that way in large part because of their perception of the relationship with their immediate supervisor. It's around where they feel their immediate supervisor cares about them and their careers, and it's trying to help them achieve their career goals and improve their performance. So realize that we're kind of preaching to the choir here, so we thought we'd give you real quickly some tools, some messages that you might want to take back to your leadership team to help them realize the advantage of having engaged employees. And so I've got kind of 10 messages here. I'm going to move through these very quickly. But as we go, I hope you'll kind of take notes about any of these, or maybe a couple of these that would really resonate with your leadership team. You could take back to them that really would would get their attention. And of course, as I mentioned, if you have questions about these, we'll try to address these at the end of the webinar today. So the first message is that engagement is really necessary for sustained profits and growth. And so this model that I have in front of you originally came from Harvard and was referred to as a service profit chain. And then it has been adopted by many organizations as a part of their business strategy, Disney being one that works on this model all the time. And in essence, what the model is saying is that if an organization wants to achieve profits and growth, then the way to get there is through higher levels of customer satisfaction and loyalty. And when you ask customers what will cause them to be satisfied and loyal, they say, we want you to provide quality products and services. So those products and services can only be of high quality based on employees' performance and engaged, as we've talked about, and we'll talk about a little bit more, engaged employees tend to perform at a higher level. And whether those employees are engaged or not depends in large part upon their relationship with their immediate supervisor. And the leadership team then at Disney and others needs to realize that each of these stages needs to be addressed, or each of these steps need to be a part of the business strategy in order to get to those profits, increased profits and growth. Another main message that you might want to take back to your leadership team is that in America, a majority of employees aren't engaged. As you can see here, Gallup and others have found that less than a third of employees in the United States are engaged. Over half are unengaged, or those are the go-mos, we call them, going through the motion. They are kind of just punching the clock. They're waiting for today, Friday, maybe to get that paycheck. And then you have got about 17% of the balance who are disengaged, and those are employees who are not only are they not satisfied, but it's their mission in life to make sure that other employees aren't satisfied as well. And as you look at these three categories, I'm sure you can think of employees within your organization. Maybe that would fit in all three of these. But another key message here is that this degree of employee engagement has not, Gallup has found, has not increased in 10 years. So we have huge opportunities in America and across the world, actually, to enhance level of employee engagement. A third message you might want to utilize is just the fact that this is not something that someone has just dreamt up. There have been, as mentioned, over 100 research studies on the topic. All of these major consulting houses, research organizations have conducted extensive research on the topic. And so bottom line then is that this topic is well researched, that is a proven fact that more engaged employees perform at a higher level. In Gallup's, just one example of that research study, Gallup has been working at this, as you can see, for over 20 years. They've researched 2,500 business units, 80,000 managers, 1 million employees. And their original intent was just find out why some organizations are more successful than others. And as they started looking at those successful organizations, they saw that the supervisors, managers, and leaders performed differently, acted differently in those successful organizations. And so then Gallup said, all right, let's look at these managers in the successful organizations and find out what it is that they do that drive the better performance from their organizations, and those practices of these managers in the high-performing organizations are what's led to the employee engagement or performance needs that we'll look at in just a minute, and that are addressed in the GEA survey. So, and again, this Gallup's research, I'm fond of theirs for a number of reasons, but as you can see here, it just shows that engaged employees give an organization a lot more of what the organization wants from the employees. And every time I look at these, I just kind of think about, kind of ask myself, what could an organization do? What kind of changes could you make to bring about this improvement in employee performance? And quite frankly, I don't have a good answer. I mean, you might say improved IT systems or processes or whatever, and maybe you get this, maybe you wouldn't, but certainly those would be expensive to buy and to implement, whereas increasing employee engagement is very inexpensive. Fifth message is that because of all that research, some of the better managed organizations in the U.S. have very active programs to maintain and increase their levels of employee engagement. So, and these and others kind of are who's who in both service organizations as well as manufacturing organizations. Take the first one, Ritz-Carlton. Increasing employee engagement is a key piece of their business strategy, and the Ritz-Carlton has won the Malcolm Baldrige U.S. Quality Award twice, which is one of only a couple of organizations that have won that very prestigious award on 2 separate times. Campbell Soup, I see that name. The CEO at Campbell Soup turned the organization around in large part by stressing employee engagement. I was facilitating a year or so ago a workshop of the American Management Association, and I started talking about employee engagement. And one manager participating threw his hand up and said, "Well, let me tell you about it." And turned out he was with Campbell Soup, and he went on and on about how they continuously survey their employees, determine levels of employee engagement. They use those survey results to set goals for their organization and for each of their supervisors. Their supervisors' performance appraisals are based in part upon whether they meet their employee engagement goals or not. Their merits, their bonuses, their promotions are dependent in part upon meeting those engagement goals as well. Our sixth message is that any business plan or strategy of any type is really of no value unless it's executed. And the business plans and strategies don't tend to be executed unless employees want to do so. So then those employees who are more engaged, have a positive relationship with their supervisors, feel that their organization is supportive, are much more likely to be willing and active in executing business plans, business strategies, etc. A seventh message is, and I referenced this just a minute ago, is the fact that a level of employee engagement is dependent upon several factors, but the most significant driver of employee engagement is an employee's relationship with his or her supervisor. Gallup has determined this. A lot of the other research organizations that we referenced just a minute ago have supported this same message. And so employees tend to be more engaged if they feel like their supervisor cares about them and is working to help them improve their performance. Because again, the research shows that the vast majority of employees do want to do a good job. Obviously, there are exceptions. The vast majority of them want to do so. And so whether they tend to be engaged or not is dependent upon whether they feel like their immediate supervisor in the organization are helping them and satisfy those improvement goals. These are 6 of the dozen employee engagement needs or performance needs that have been identified from the extensive research that's been conducted on the subject. And when you look at these, I mean, they really look like no-brainers. Obviously, employees are going to tend to perform at a higher level if they understand what's expected of them, if they have adequate materials and equipment, if they feel like their talents or their skill sets are being utilized, that they are in jobs where they can perform at the highest level. Ken Blanchard has made multi-millions of dollars around the concept of recognizing and rewarding employee behavior to cause employees to repeat the behavior that you want them to exhibit. Employees tend to be, again, quite obviously, more engaged if they feel like their supervisor cares about them personally and is working to help them improve their skill sets or reach their career goals. So these 6 and the other 6 are included and addressed in GEA's survey process, employee engagement survey process. And the good news about this is that these are real actionable. That I think any supervisor who really cares and wants to make improvements in these areas can do so. They're just practical ways of supervisors meeting those engagement needs and also practical steps that organizations can put in place. So, for example, Disney then just causes it to not be secretive. They communicate clearly to their supervisors and managers the fact that they want them to be engagement coaches, and they explain to them those practices and behaviors that are expected of them. They train those supervisors in those practices. Through engagement surveys, they're constantly getting feedback from employees in terms of whether their needs are being met or not, and then they hold their managers accountable for meeting those needs, kind of like Campbell Soup, as we were talking about, and others, through appraisals, merits, and promotions. And sometimes, fairly often, as a matter of fact, following the administration of the GEA Employee Engagement Survey, companies will want us to meet individually with their supervisors to review the survey results and then to help provide those supervisors some practical initiatives that they can implement to improve their survey scores. And we have those. We have for each of the employee engagement needs, we have some very practical steps that a supervisor go back out and almost implement that same day if they cared to do so. And the 10th message around employee engagement that I want to reference today is the fact that supervisors have multiple touch points or opportunities to enhance employee engagement. So the real question is whether those supervisors see those touch points then with employees as interruptions in their job or the core of their job. Or do they see them as interruptions, or they see them as opportunities to listen to employees, to improve their relationship, to coach them, to increase employee engagement, increase employees' performance, as well as resulting improvements in organizational performance. So I'll very quickly run through these kind of 10 messages around employee engagement, but my hope is that a couple of these you might take back to your leadership team, and they may, hopefully those messages will resonate with them. And in a moment, we're going to leave some time for questions, so I'll be glad to try to address any of those related to these messages, or how you, where these messages came from, or how you might communicate those back to your leadership team. So, third thing I wanted to address today then is GEA's Union Vulnerability and Employee Engagement Survey itself. It amounts to a 5-step process, beginning with pre-survey meeting and/or telephone calls to tailor the process to the member company's needs. And that, of course, we have to, at that point, have to talk about timeline, scheduling, and particularly segmentation preferences. And let me address that in a little bit of detail. As we were just talking about, the research shows that a major determinant of an employee's level of employee engagement is a relationship with their immediate supervisor. And so we strongly recommend that member companies utilizing the survey allow us to segment the results by supervisor. Because if you can imagine having an organization that's, let's say, had 10 supervisors, and we surveyed the employees and gave the employee engagement survey results back to their organization, and just as an organizational score, then the organization would not know what's working and what isn't, where their issues are. So again, we recommend allowing us to segment by supervisor, so the organization will get the survey results back with the employee engagement survey company-wide, by facility, by division, by department, and very importantly, by individual supervisor. So at that point, then you are able to go back to each of the supervisors and say, Fred, these are your perceptions of your employees in terms of whether their needs, engagement needs, are being met or not. You know, you did very well on these 10, but there are 2 areas here where the employees feel like there's opportunities for improvement. One of those being having clear expectations, as an example, of what you expect of them. So Fred might be communicating his expectations daily. He may think this is perfectly clear to employees, but if the survey reveals that those employees are not getting that message, then Fred is in a much stronger position knowing that, so that he can go back and address that and ramp that up and look for other ways to communicate his expectations. And also Fred can know then those areas where the engagement needs are being met. He can know that what he's doing right now is working, so he can continue to do so. So that pre-survey meeting or conference call is a big step, and one of the big steps here is determining the proper segmentation preferences. The second step is the GEA can help you then in announcing the survey. We have notices, that sample notices, drafts, that sort of thing, and can kind of talk to you about a process for communicating that there will be a survey. The survey itself can be administered by GEA, and as we're saying here, 15 to 30-minute meetings. Usually they don't take more than 15 or 20 minutes on the outside. In those meetings, it does not matter how many employees are in the meeting. It doesn't matter what department they're from. We can still segment the results. And so hypothetically, if you had an organization of 50 employees and you had a room big enough to get them in, then in 20 minutes we can have the survey completed and then compile the results for you. We can also administer it online, or you can administer the survey yourself and send us the responses, and we compile the findings report, which is the fourth step there. And once that's put together, then as I mentioned, you would get back by organization, by facility, by department, and by individual supervisor, the degree of employee engagement for each of those segments, and also the degree of union vulnerability for each of those segments. And we compare those engagement scores and union vulnerability scores to GEA's database. And that GEA database then is made up of, obviously, I guess, companies, member companies, who have taken that same survey in the past. So it's not an absolute comparison, but it certainly gives you a good frame of reference to know that by question you can get a sense for whether you are your scores are more positive or less positive than other companies that have taken it. After you have the findings report and you've looked over that, then GEA will meet with you or conduct telephone conference calls to assist you in trying to understand the survey results, what the employees are really saying, answer any questions that leadership team might have, and then beginning to propose potential follow-up initiatives that you might put in place based on your results. So there are a number of benefits to using the GEA survey. The consulting team has done this for many years. GEA has a sound survey process, significant database, as I just mentioned, for comparing your scores. The administration fee for the survey is significantly less than other consulting houses, other organizations. You will get in that findings report, as I mentioned, quantitative data indicating degree of union vulnerability and employee engagement for each segment, to include down to each individual supervisor. The survey will allow you to establish a benchmark and scorecard for improvement goals and plans. And let me just mention one company where we recently administered the survey. And in working with the director of HR in advance, he told me that The organization is very metrics driven. He said, we measure a lot of things. He said, but we believe in employee engagement, and we don't have a sound way of measuring our employees' relationships with their supervisors or their degree of employee engagement. And we know that if we can improve that, then the organization will perform at a higher level. And so he and that leadership team wanted the survey results so that would be a metric related to employees that they could set goals around and strive to improve upon. And then lastly, another benefit obviously is knowing where your issues are in advance and addressing those will make you less vulnerable to unionization, particularly given the new board regulations that are going to take place in April. That will allow you to know where you can go in and put some initiative in place to improve employee engagement and thus improve your organization's performance. So the survey allows you to identify hotspots or opportunities for improvement. It allows you to help supervisors implement practical tools appropriate for working with their teams, and designing development plans for those supervisors so that they can enhance the relationship with their teams. If you want, usually this is not done with first survey, but oftentimes the second or later surveys in organizations start to say to supervisors, okay, you understand the process, we believe in it, and so we're going to start to make this a part of your performance appraisal and holding you accountable for improving those relationships as well as in improving those union vulnerability and employee engagement scores. So I've addressed a lot in a kind of short period of time. We've got about 15 minutes left. I do want to go back and talk about kind of maybe your next steps and give you the GEA's thank you for participating. But David, do you have any questions for us?
Of course, first question is, can I get a copy of the slides? And I think either do you have your email address there, Pete, or?
Yeah, I think my email address is on the last slide, but it's Pete, P-E-T-E, Tosh, T-O-S-H, at the T-H-E, Focus, F-O-C-U-S, Group, G-R-O-U-P, .biz, B-I-Z.
And
so certainly will, anybody that's interested will just let us know, shoot us an email, and we'll send you the slides.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, you addressed this partially earlier, but is it cheaper to do a survey online for those who have access to a computer?
Not necessarily so, and the reason I say that is because while online surveys appear to be expedient, they also have the real challenge of getting participation from employees, and so if you administer the survey in employee group meetings face to face, as we often do, and as I mentioned earlier, I mean, you can just about guarantee 100% participation from employees. I mean, they're there. It's a requirement to come in to the meeting. They complete the survey, and you have them. With online surveys, you have to work real hard with the announcements. You have to continuously go back to employees and try to encourage them after the deadline to go back and take the survey. Many times you have to kind of offer incentives to get employees to complete the survey. You know, the next 10 complete surveys that come in, we'll give each of those employees, you have to work, it's confidential, but there are ways of working around and knowing who the employee is and give them gift certificates, that sort of thing. So it can be less expensive administering online than face-to-face if the company is going to do all of that in terms of the special announcements and the follow-up and that sort of thing. If GEA is involved in all of that, then kind of at the end of the day, it's not necessarily less expensive than it is face-to-face.
Mm-hmm.
So,
good. Thank
kind
you.
of a rambling answer, but that's the truth. That's the way it works out.
You mentioned one specific example. Do you have other examples, real-life examples of how the surveys helped companies in the past?
Oh, yeah. I remember we conducted the survey at one manufacturing facility, put the findings report together, met with the leadership team, and in their production department, which made up most of the employees in that particular facility, those employees reported up to one of two individuals, basically manufacturing superintendents. Practically employees, candidates were interviewed, and they would be sent to whichever department had an opening. Their pay was pretty comparable, policies, procedures pretty comparable, etc. But except the leadership team was different, the two individuals. When we presented the findings report, there was a stark difference between the level of employee engagement scores for the one superintendent than there was for the other. The leadership team was pretty kind of shocked by that, and then they started to talk about it in these comments. They started making these comments, well, we have heard complaints about X. We have had more turnover in X, things like that. So the point I'm making is that the leadership team had, the leadership team knew things were going on, but they had just received it in those messages kind of anecdotally. They didn't have any documentation or quantitative data that they could rely on. The engagement score gave them that information, and it confirmed what kind of their hunches. And as a result, they were able to go in and kind of address their issues.
Thank you, Pete. Okay, now I don't have any more questions typed out, written out, but if anybody wants to raise their hand, I can unmute your line. You can ask a question directly to Pete over the phone. Still don't see any questions, Pete. So.
Okay, all right.
We'll move forward.
All right. So kind of the next to last comment I'm going to make was just kind of your next step. So I think bottom line is we're all striving to increase profits and growth within our organization. The research is out there that shows that increasing employee engagement leads to higher company performance and profits and growth. And certainly we all know that it's very expensive to be organized. I mean, not necessarily because your wages and benefits would necessarily be enhanced, because of course the company negotiates contract and can always refuse to do so. But the day-to-day administration of grievances and complaints and dealing with shop stewards and negotiation, etc., significantly increases the cost of doing business. So if companies that aren't striving to improve employee engagement and reduce their union vulnerability are really taking a risk and leaving a lot of money on the table. So the question, maybe most important point of the webinar today is kind of, I'll just throw it to you in terms of what you'll be able to take back to your leadership team.
Pete,
yes. Mm-hmm.
We do have one caller who wants to answer, who asked a question over the phone.
Okay, sure.
I'm gonna unmute his line. Greg, I'm gonna unmute your line.
All right.
You should be able to hear us. You should be able to talk to us, Greg.
Great. David, thank you for setting this up, and Pete, thanks for the information. Can you address the cost of this survey and the process in ballpark numbers? I know it's specific to each organization, but can you give us an idea what the cost would be from a budget standpoint?
Yeah, yeah, exactly right. It does vary. It depends upon the number of employees, and it also depends upon the number of segments, and it's dependent upon the type of administration. So obviously, you know, there's a lot more computation that goes into to putting a report together with 50 segments than it is 10, et cetera. So we're looking at somewhere in the ballpark, kind of $25, $30 per employee, as a ballpark number. But that can vary, again, depending upon numbers of employees, numbers of segments, and the way the survey is administered.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello?
All right. So hopefully you picked up an idea or two that you can take back to your leadership team. So just in conclusion today, let me thank you for your participation. And so the offer from GEA will be twofold. One is kind of free consultation. So GEA will come out and meet with you or talk to you on the phone and or with your leadership team and kind of go through what we talked about today, or just the survey process, address their questions, et cetera. And then also we'll discount that fee that we were just talking about when we answered Greg's question. We'll discount that for any companies that come back and schedule surveys in the first quarter of this year. So hope you'll give that offer some consideration. And yeah, I did have my email on that, the last slide. So any of you are interested in a copy of the slides, please just shoot me an email. I'll be glad to send those to you. And hopefully you picked up an idea too that you can take back to your leadership team that will help you take advantage of the enhancing employee engagement and minimize your union vulnerability, because again, those board regulations are really scary, and I hate to kind of think about what's going to happen starting in April, but I think has potential not to be a pretty picture. So, David, if there are no other questions, thank you for hosting, and appreciate everybody participating in this. Thank you very much.
Yeah, let me just add my appreciation to Pete's. Appreciate you attending and your participation, and please let us know. You have Pete's email address, and you probably have mine as well. So in case there's anything we can do for y'all, please let us know. Y'all have a great afternoon and a great weekend.
Thanks, David. Take care.
Thanks. Take care.